Hello again, folks. Welcome back to Max's Cards and Dice Dugout. This is episode number 44. Robert Max here. Hope everyone's doing okay. And this time out, we're returning to Downey Games Fast Action Racing for the 1991 Stock Car Project. We're up to race 5, and that's at Darlington, the track too tough to tame. But before we get to the race today, let's take a look at the standings after race 4. So Rick Mast is the points leader with 122 points. That's based on his consistent performance so far. I mean, he has not won a race, but he has 3 top 5 finishes. And he's followed by Ricky Rudd, who's 11 points behind. And rounding out the top 10, we have Harry Gant, Kyle Petty, Ernie Irvin, Sterling Marlin, Alan Kulwicki, Darrell Waltrip, Bobby Hamilton, and Rusty Wallace. So that's the standings coming into this race number 5 at Darlington. This was the TranSouth 500. It took place on April 7th, 1991. The pole sitter that day was Jeff Bodine, and the race winner was Ricky Rudd. All right. So the first thing we do is shuffle the driver cards, and I'll give them a cut, and then we'll place them on the grid. And once again, this grid is not a representation of running order. It is some sort of abstraction. I don't completely understand it, to be honest with you, but it's what we use to determine these different grooves on the track. At least that's how they're explained in the rules. All right, so we gave cards a shuffle and a cut, and we'll set the grid. And let's see, we've got Derek Cope, Sterling Marlin, Morgan Shepherd, Mark Martin, Rick Wilson. Okay, I'm doing this, let's see, this isn't how I normally do this. All right, we go there. Mark Martin goes there. Morgan Shepherd there. Sorry about that. Not that it really matters, because this is just a random placement, but this is what I've been doing, so I'm going to continue to do it. All right, so we had Rick Wilson, Joe Rootman, Dale Jarrett, Ken Schrader, Jimmy Spencer, Richard Petty, Darrell Waltrip, Dale Earnhardt, who's been struggling this season so far, Michael Waltrip, Rusty Wallace, Ted Musgrave, one of the 2 rookies in this season, Alan Kulwicki, Stanley Smith, Terry Labonte, Bill Elliott, Davey Allison, Ernie Irvin, Harry Gant, Rick Mast, points leader, Brett Bodine, Bobby Hamilton, he's the other rookie in 91, Ricky Rudd, Kyle Petty, Mickey Gibbs, Lake Speed, Jeff Bodine, the pole sitter in the actual race on April 7th, 1991. Bobby Hillin Jr., Hut Strickland, Larry Pearson, Jimmy Means, Dave Marcus, and last but not least, Chad Little. All right, so the field is set. The first thing we'll do is determine the pole sitter. Now, only certain drivers on here, based on their performance that year, have an opportunity to be a pole sitter. So we're gonna roll the red and white die, read the red die first, and then we'll check the cards to see who the pole sitter is. All right, so we have an 11. So we're looking for an 11 in the pole section of the driver card, and it's Ricky Rudd. All right, so Ricky Rudd is going to be the pole sitter. And as I probably have mentioned, there's a lot of paperwork, a lot of bookkeeping to do. So you have to excuse me for that. So it's Rudd as the pole sitter, and he's going to face an initial challenge. Now, only during this initial challenge against the pole sitter gets a +1. So Ricky Rudd, who is an 11, and we're going to be looking at the green race rating. He'll be a 12 for this, and we will randomly determine who that is going to be. that's going to give him this challenge. All right, and that is a 62, and it's going to be Chad Little. So he's going to face a challenge from Chad Little. Okay, Rudd's an 11. He's a 12 for this. And Chad Little's an 8. So that's a +4. And a +4 is, a -4, because we're looking at it from Chad Little's perspective. He needs an 11 or 12 for this challenge to be successful. One other thing I failed to mention is here at Darlington, the contact and mechanical possibilities have a -1. So even though this is the track Too Tough to Tame, there is a slightly less chance for contact or mechanical failure here than, say, a track that was rated as a 0 or a +1. All right, so anyway, back to the race. We're going to have our first challenge, Chad Little challenging Ricky Rudd, and he needs an 11 or 12. So we'll roll the black die for this. He rolls a 5 and fails. So that was a fail. And Ricky Rudd, after they come out, he is your initial race leader. Okay, so now we're going to the first check. I have this green die here to keep track of who the race leader is at the time. So right now it's Ricky Rudd. The first phase is going to be this mechanical check. We're going to check and see if there's any cars have any mechanical issues. We're going to choose a random driver using the red and white die, and 4 adjacent drivers. This could include the leader. Okay, so we have a 13. A 13. 1-3 is Sterling Marlin. Okay, using the priority rolls, we go to 12 o'clock, Davey Allison. Rick Mast is the 3 o'clock. Bill Elliott is the 6 o'clock. And we wrap around all the way over here to Dave Marcus. He'll be the 9 o'clock. Okay, so this mechanical phase, we're going to be looking at the red mechanical problem avoidance number, okay? And it'll be Sterling Marlin that we check first. Now, if the die roll is equal to the mechanical rating, the driver is lapped, and he gets a red lap marker, which means he had a mechanical problem, had to come into the pits for a long time, or possibly had to go behind the wall, and he'll be several laps down. So that's if he is equal. If the die roll is greater than his mechanical rating, he's forced to retire. Now remember, in this phase we are -1, so it's I said it was going to be easy or less likely. It's actually a little bit more likely that there'll be a mechanical issue, and the same with contact. All right, so the first we check is Sterling Marlin. Now he is a 10, but that's a 9 here at Darlington, so he needs an 8 or less. He rolls a 10, and he's forced to retire right off the bat. Sterling Marlin's gone. All right, so did not finish. Now we go to Davey Allison. Davey Allison is also a 9. He needs less than an 8. He rolls a 2, and he's good. So Allison passes. Next is Rick Mast. He's a 7, but that makes him a 6 here at Darlington. So he needs a 5 or less to avoid any mechanical problems. He rolls a 12, and he's forced to retire. That's going to affect our points leader for sure. So Rick Mast did not finish. And now we go to Bill Elliott. He's a 9, but he's an 8 here at Darlington. He rolls a 6, and he passes. And last would be Dave Marcus, all the way over here. Dave Marcus is a 2. He can't pass. And he's going to have to retire because he drops down to a 1. And, of course, rolling 2 die, the lowest we can get is 2. So that's unfortunate for Dave Marcus. And he's out of the race. So after that mechanical phase, we lost 3 of the 5 drivers who had to go through a check, and Ricky Rudd remains the race leader. And now he's going to face a challenge. All right, and we do that by using the red and white die. We have a 64, and the 64 Stanley Smith. Okay, Stanley Smith is a 2. Ricky Rudd is an 11. That's less than a -5. So Stanley Smith is automatically lapped. So he's a lap down. It's a fail. And Ricky Rudd remains the race leader. He's lapped the green lap marker. Okay, now we're going to have a phase of green flag racing. So we're going to choose a random driver for adjacent, and they're going to go up against the leader. We're going to use the quality pass matrix to determine what the results are. So remember, Ricky Rudd's our leader, and we're going to randomly select a driver, and it's a 34. That's Ricky Rudd. He can't go up against himself, so we'll roll again. And that's a 31, and a 31 is Dale Jarrett. So it's going to be Dale Jarrett, Bobby Hamilton, Mickey Gibbs. For his 6 o'clock, we go up to Kyle Petty. And for the 9 o'clock, it's going to be Harry Gant. Okay, so we're looking at this is green flag racing, so we're looking at the green race rating for each driver. Okay, so first it's going to be Dale Jarrett going up against Ricky Rudd. Rudd's an 11, Jarrett's a 10. He's doing this at a -1. He needs an 8 to 12. He rolls an 11, and we have a new race leader. So that is a pass, and Dale Jarrett is the new race leader. So we move this marker to him, and the rest of the checks go up against Dale Jarrett, as long as he maintains the lead. Okay, so the next is Bobby Hamilton. He's a 10, Dale Jarrett's a 10. So that's a 0. So Bobby Hamilton needs a 7 to 12 to be successful. He rolls a 9. So we have another lead change. Bobby Hamilton is now the race leader. So move that marker to Hamilton. And he's going to face a challenge from Mickey Gibbs. Mickey Gibbs is an 8. Bobby Hamilton's a 10. That's a -2. So that's a 9 to 12. And he rolls an 11, and we have another new race leader, Mickey Gibbs. All right, so this green flag racing is having quite a few lead changes. All right, now next it's Kyle Petty. Kyle Petty's an 11. Mickey Gibbs is an 8. That's a +3. So Kyle Petty needs a 4 to 12 to take the lead. And he, excuse me for hitting the camera there. He rolls a 5 and barely passes, but we have Kyle Petty now as the new leader. Okay, so Kyle Petty's an 11. And the last challenge is going to come from Harry Gant. He's also an 11. So that's a 0. Harry Gant needs a 7 to 12. He rolls an 8, and we have another lead change. Harry Gant is now the race leader. All right, so we'll move the marker here down to Harry Gant. And now we're going to have some green flag pit stops. That's this section here. We're going to be looking at the blue pit crew rating. Okay, it's going to be 4 random driver, 4 adjacent versus the leader. And once again, we're going to use the matrix. And you can have several lead changes here. You know, this is like cars pitting on different laps for fuel or whatever. So first we have to select our random driver, and that's going to be a 13. That driver's gone. We'll roll again. And we roll a 31, and that's going to be Dale Jarrett. So it's Dale Jarrett. His 12 o'clock is Bobby Hamilton. 3 o'clock is Mickey Gibbs. Kyle Petty is his 6 o'clock. And his 9 o'clock cannot be Harry Gant because he's already involved in this, so it moves over to Derek Cope. All right, so we are looking at the blue pit crew rating, and we use that to use the quality pass matrix, okay? So first up is Dale Jarrett. He's a 7, Harry Gant's a 9. He's doing this at a -2. He needs a 9 to 12. He rolls a 5 and fails. So Jarrett fails. Harry Gant remains the race leader. Okay, next up is Bobby Hamilton. Bobby Hamilton is an 8. Harry Gant's a 9. He's doing this at a -1. He needs an 8 to 12. He rolls a 9 and is successful. So he passes the check, and Hamilton's in the lead again. So we'll move the marker to him. The rest of the checks, as long as he's in the lead, will go against him. Now it's Mickey Gibbs. He's a 7. Bobby Hamilton is an 8. So this check is at a -1. He needs an 8 to 12. He rolls a 10 and is successful. So Mickey Gibbs is in the lead. He passes. It's the second time for Gibbs. So far, all the racing has kind of taken place in this one area on the track. Okay, now we have Kyle Petty again. He's a 10. Mickey Gibbs is a 7. So Petty's doing this at a +3. He needs a 4 to 12. He rolls an 8, and Kyle Petty takes the lead. It's Kyle Petty. And the last challenge is going to come from Derek Cope. He's a 6. Kyle Petty's a 10. That's a -4. He needs an 11 or 12. He rolls a 5 and fails. So coming out of the green flag pit stops, Kyle Petty is now the leader. Okay, so now we're going to check to see if there are any, this is a penalty phase. We're going to check to see if there were any penalties during the pit stops, you know. So what we do is we choose a random driver in the 4 adjacent, and we look at the pit crew rating again. If the die is lower or equal to the pit crew rating, it's good. If it's higher, then he's forced to come in for a stop and go due to some infraction in the pits, and he will go a lap down. Okay, so first we got to select our random driver, and that is a 15, and a 15 is Mark Martin. So it's going to be Mark Martin. Ernie Irvin is his 12. Brett Bodine is his 3. Davey Allison is his 6. And we wrap around over to Chad Little. He's his 9 o'clock. All right, so once again, we're looking at the blue pit crew rating. The die is equal to or lower, it's good. If it's higher, he's penalized and has to come in for a stop and go. So Mark Martin's an 8. He needs an 8 or less. He rolls an 8, so he's safe. Mark Martin passes. Ernie Irvin. Irvin is also an 8. He needs an 8 or less. He rolls a 10 and fails. So Ernie Irvin is penalized and forced to come in for a stop and go. He goes a lap down. So Irvin fails, and he's lapped green. Next is Brett Bodine. Brett Bodine is a 7, so he needs a 7 or less. He rolls a 4 and is successful. Passes. Davey Allison, he's an 8. He needs an 8 or less. He rolls an 8, and he's successful. And last for this check is Chad Little over here. He needs a 7 or less. He rolls a 6, and he's successful. So everyone The only infraction was Ernie Irvin in the pit crew, during the pit stops. So everyone passed, and Kyle Petty remains the race leader. Now he's going to face another challenge. This is the one phase of the race where there are 2 challenges in a row. Okay, so we got to determine who he's going to face the challenge from, and that is 42. And he's going to face the challenge from his father, the King. So Richard Petty is going to be going up against his son for a challenge. Richard Petty's an 8, Kyle Petty's an 11. That is a -3. Richard Petty needs a 10 to 12 to be successful. He rolls a 6 and fails. So he fails, and Kyle Petty remains the leader. And now it's going to be another challenge. And that is a 35, and a 35 is Jimmy Spencer, the pride of Berwick, PA. All right, Jimmy Spencer is an 8. Kyle Petty's an 11. It's a -3. He needs a 10 to 12. And he rolls a 3, and he fails. And Kyle Petty remains the race leader. Okay, now we have a contact check. And remember, we have a -1 modifier for this. So what we're going to do is we're going to select a random driver and 4 adjacent. And we'll determine if there's any contact. So here's the random driver, and it is a 61, and it's Jimmy Means. Okay, his 12 o'clock is Alan Kulwicki. His 3 o'clock comes over here to Derek Cope. His 6 o'clock wraps up to the top to Terry Labonte. And his 9 o'clock is Michael Waltrip. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at the yellow number, the contact avoidance number. And remember, that's a -1, so that drops that number to a 7. Or excuse me, in the case of Jimmy Means, his 8 would become a 7. So he needs a die roll lower than his contact rating to be safe. If he equals it, he's going to get a yellow lap marker, meaning he's several laps down. And if the die roll is greater than 7, in this case, he's going to be forced to retire. All right, so we start out with Jimmy Means. He's an 8. That drops to a 7. He needs less than a 7. He rolls a 7. So he is going to be down several laps due to some contact. He fails, gets a yellow lap marker. And the next check is going to be Alan Kulwicki. He's also an 8. That drops to a 7. He rolls snake eyes. He's safe. So Alan Kulwicki passes the contact check. Next is Derek Cope. He's a 5. That drops to a 4. So he needs a 4 or less. He rolls a 5, which equals his contact rating. Or excuse me, no, he's forced to retire because his contact rating is actually a 4 because of the -1. So Derek Cope did not finish. Next is Terry Labonte. He's a 9. That drops to an 8. He rolls a 7 and is safe. Labonte passes. And last for this check is Michael Waltrip. He's a 9, which drops to an 8 here at Darlington. So he needs a 7 or less. And he rolls an 8. So he is going to be a lap down because it equals his contact avoidance rating. All right, so Michael Waltrip failed. He's a lap down, yellow. And Kyle Petty is still the race leader. Okay. Now we're going to have pit stops under caution. We're going to be looking at the blue pit crew number. Random driver, the race leader, and adjacent cars. So it's going to be the race leader, Kyle Petty, and the cars adjacent to him using the rules of priority, and one random driver. So it's going to be Kyle Petty, His 12 o'clock is Dale Jarrett, as we wrap around. His 3 o'clock is Dale Earnhardt. His 6 o'clock is Jimmy Spencer. And his 9 o'clock is Joe Rootman. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the pit crew ratings. Oh, and we have to select 1, 2, 3 race leader and adjacent cars. 1, 2. Something doesn't look right here on this sheet this time. This is the let's see, race leader and adjacent cars +1 random. Okay, they're going up against the race leader, Kyle Petty. So we have to pick I apologize about that. We have to pick a random driver, and that's going to be 45, and that's Jeff Bodine. Okay, so Jeff Bodine will be the last check. Okay, and these are all going up against the race leader, and we use a quality pass matrix looking at the blue pit rating. Okay, so the first one is Dale Jarrett. He's a 7. Kyle Petty's a 10. That's a -3. He needs a 10 to 12. He gets a 3 and fails. So Jarrett fails. Kyle Petty remains the race leader. Next is Dale Earnhardt. He's a 10. Kyle Petty's a 10. That's a 0. Dale Earnhardt needs a 7 to 12. He rolls an 8 and becomes the new race leader. Earnhardt passes. Now Jimmy Spencer is going to be going up against Dale Earnhardt now. Jimmy Spencer is a 7. Dale Earnhardt's a 10. That's a -3. He needs a 10 to 12. He rolls an 8 and fails. So Dale Earnhardt remains the race leader. Now it's Joe Rootman. He's an 8. Dale Earnhardt's a 10. It's a -2. He needs a 9 to 12. And he gets a 9. So Joe Rootman becomes the race leader. Rootman passes, and he becomes the race leader. And the last is Jeff Bodine. He's an 8. Rootman's an 8. That's a 0. He needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 4 and fails. So Joe Rootman is the new race leader, and he's going to face a challenge. All right, we're getting close. After this challenge, we're going to go into the closing laps action phase. But this challenge is going to be Rootman up against 14, Davey Allison. Okay, Rootman is a 9. Davey Allison's an 11. That's a +2. He needs a 5 to 12 to take the lead. He rolls a 6, and we have a new race leader. A lot of lead changes in this race, and it's Davey Allison. So Davey Allison passes and takes the lead. All right, now we have to check to see if there's going to be a mechanical check. Now, this mechanical check at the end, it's only against the leader. But we have to see if it's going to occur. So here at Darlington, we need a roll of 7 to 12 for it to occur. And we roll a 6, so that's a no. So there's no mechanical check. And now Allison's still the leader, and he's going to face the challenge. So we'll determine that randomly. We have a 44. The 44 is Darrell Waltrip. Okay, so Darrell Waltrip is an 11. Davey Allison's an 11. That's a 0. So Darrell Waltrip needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 7, and he takes the lead. So we have another lead change, and it's now Darrell Waltrip. So he passes. And it's Darrell Waltrip in the lead. Now we have to check, see if there's any contact. Okay, and here at Darlington, you need an 8 to 12. And we rolled a 7, so there's no contact check. So Darrell Waltrip remains the race leader. And there are no pit crew stops under caution because there wasn't any contact, which is the next phase. So we skip by that as well. And now Darrell Waltrip's going to face a challenge. And that challenge is coming from 52, Bobby Hillen Jr. So it's Hillen Jr. All right. Bobby Hillen Jr. is a 10. Darrell Waltrip's an 11. This is coming at a -1. So he needs an 8 to 12. He rolls a 5 and fails. And Darrell Waltrip remains the race leader. Now we have some more green flag pit stops. If there had been contact and pit stops under caution, we would have skipped this phase. But since there wasn't, we have to go through it, and we'll be using the quality pass matrix and looking at the blue pit crew rating. We take the leader, his 4 adjacent drivers, and 1 random. So it's going to be Jeff Bodine, Hut Strickland is his 3 o'clock. Lake Speed is his 6 o'clock. Ricky Rudd is his 9 o'clock. And the random driver is going to be Mark Martin. Okay, so these are this is going to simulate some late race pit stops under green. So there may be several lead changes here, and we'll see how that goes. They're going to be all going up against Darrell Waltrip as long as he's the leader. So the first one is Jeff Bodine, and Jeff Bodine is an 8. Darrell Waltrip is an 8. That's a 0. He needs a 7 to 12. He rolls an 8, and Jeff Bodine is the new race leader. So he passes. So now it's Hut Strickland. He's an 8. Bodine's an 8. That's a 0 again. Needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 4 and fails. And Jeff Bodine remains the race leader. So now he's going up against Lake Speed. Speed is a 6. Bodine's an 8. That's a -2. He needs a 9 to 12. He rolls a 4 and fails. Jeff Bodine remains the leader. Now it's Ricky Rudd. Ricky Rudd's a 9. Jeff Bodine's an 8. That's a +1. He needs a 6 to 12. He rolls a 4, and we have a new race leader in Ricky Rudd. So he passes. Now the last challenge is going to be Ricky Rudd against Mark Martin. Mark Martin's an 8. Ricky Rudd's a 9. That's a -1. He needs an 8 to 12. He rolls a 9, and we have a new race leader in Mark Martin. So Mark Martin is the race leader. Okay, now we have to check to see if there's any green flag racing. On an 8 to 12, there is. So here we go. We roll a 5, and that's a no as well. All right, so we've down to the nitty-gritty at the end. It's a final challenge. The way this works, it's the race leader and the adjacent drivers that are eligible. Ernie Irvin is not eligible to challenge for the lead because he is lapped. So it's going to be, Brett Bodine, and we do this by rules of priority. Brett Bodine's a 9, Davey Allison's an 11, and Chad Little is an 8. So the challenge is going to come from Davey Allison. So they're coming down, the last few laps, and they're fighting for the lead. And it's Allison and Mark Martin, who have pulled away from the pack. They're both 11, so this is coming at a 0. So Davey Allison needs a 7-12 to pass Mark Martin and win this race. Anything less than a 7, and Mark Martin will hold him off, and he'll be the winner. And it's a 7, and Davey Allison down the stretch passes Mark Martin with a lap or 2 to go. And wins this race. So Allison is the race winner. All right. So now we get to the fun part of this game. Davey Allison, of course, is your race winner. We're going to take him off the board. I'm going to leave that marker there. Mark Martin, who was part of that final challenge, he finishes second. Any other drivers that were in contention for this last challenge, they'll finish next based on priority. So we got to remember that that was here at spot 15 for Mark Martin. Well, Ernie Irvan doesn't apply because he was lapped. So it's Brett Bodine and Chad Little, I believe. Yeah, Brett Bodine and Chad Little. Brett Bodine's a 9, and he's at 3 o'clock. And Chad Little, he finishes 4th. All right, so now we're going to go around the groove, which is this top groove, I believe. No, that's considered the bottom. The one on the outside is considered the bottom. Okay, we're going to go around this groove in a clockwise motion from the leader, or from the race winner, I should say. And we'll remove the cards based on their driving rating. So coming over here, the first one is going to be Kyle Petty. That's an 11. That's as high as you can get. Dale Earnhardt has a good finish finally. See if we have any other 11s. Alan Kowicki. Lap drivers 10. Harry Gant. Bill Elliott. Okay, so we've gone through the 11s. Now we'll see if there's any 10s. Terry Labonte. Dale Jarrett. Okay, 9s. Joe Rootman. 8s. Mickey Gibbs. And the only other driver on this bottom groove that isn't lapped is Larry Pearson. Okay, so now we move in one groove, straight over from the leader, and we go clockwise once again, looking for the highest rated racers. That's going to be Hut Strickland, or no, excuse me, Jeff Bodine, then Hut Strickland, then Rusty Wallace, then Morgan Shepherd. Okay, that's the 11s. Now we go to 10s. Bobby Hillin Jr., Bobby Hamilton. Now 9s. No 9s. 8s. Be Rick Wilson, Jimmy Spencer, Ted Musgrave, and Richard Petty. And that's it for that groove. Now we go into the center groove. Going clockwise straight over from the race leader. It's going to be Ricky Rudd, Darrell Waltrip, Ken Schrader, and Lake Speed. All right, so now we go back out to the outer or bottom groove, and we'll take care of the green lap drivers. Highest race rating goes first, so it's going to be Ernie Irvan, then Stanley Smith, and that's it for the greens. Now we go to the yellows. It's going to be Michael Waltrip and Jimmy Means, and then the few drivers who failed to finish the race, they're placed at the bottom of the pack. So for Darlington, race number 5, the TranSouth 500, here's your top 10. It's Davey Allison, Mark Martin, Brett Bodine, Chad Little, Kyle Petty. 6th, Dale Earnhardt, Alan Kowicki, 7. Harry Gant, 8. Bill Elliott 9, and Terry Labonte 10. All right, so there you have it. Another 1991 stock car season race in the books. That was the TranSouth 500. Took place at Darlington on April 7th, 1991, where Ricky Rudd was the race winner, but our race winner today was Davey Allison. That's going to do it for this episode of Max's Cards and Dice Dugout. I'll be back again in the near future with another video, and until then, take care.